should never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States. Never again. Never again. Never again.
3 days later.
NBC News can now project that Donald Trump has won the state of Wisconsin, which means he is the winner of this race and will return to the White House as this country's 47th president.
So as you may know, Donald Trump is the 47th president. That was called last night in short order. He finished off Kamala Harris. And as a result, MSNBC, they are losing their mind as expected. So we're going to look at some of the meltdowns. We're going to talk about the lies, of course. And I think the best place to start is to hear them lose all their energy when Jen Psaki had to announce that he was going to be the next president. Watch.
NBC News can now project that Donald Trump has won the state of Wisconsin, which means he is the winner of this race and will return to the White House as this country's 47th president. And for so many of you watching right now, that news is, to say the least, a lot to digest. I understand that personally. After he lost 4 years ago, he refused to accept the outcome and incited a violent insurrection on our nation's capital. He's campaigned while facing criminal indictments related to his efforts to overturn the 2020 results, and he's run as a convicted felon. During this campaign, he has also promised to essentially be an authoritarian leader, to use power like no American president ever has before, and wield that power to go after his political enemies. This is a man who's also bragged about overturning Roe v. Wade and stripping away women's bodily autonomy. He's promised to conduct mass deportations to crack down on the rights of millions of Americans. Donald Trump is an anti-democratic force, but he's just been elected democratically in our country. And here's what might be the hardest part to hear, but we have to talk about and we have to say, and it is a hard part to digest for all of us. But we have to be honest about what we saw in this election. Donald Trump was elected by expanding his support over a number of key groups.
Yeah, talk about low energy, right? Clearly, they have been deflated. Okay, they really wanted Kamala Harris to win. We know MSNBC is not really a respected news organization. If you think about, if you're comparing them to CNN, ABC, CBS, I mean, they're not at the top. Okay, it's because they have dug in when it came to propaganda and obviously going after Trump. So, of course, I wanted to hear the official announcement from them. Right? I think you guys enjoyed that. Now, let's start with the first big issue and meltdown on why they believe Kamala Harris lost. And this is coming from someone who calls himself a reverend.
Rev, let's talk about, you talked about gender and race. Let's talk about race. Donald Trump fared very well with Hispanic voters, especially Hispanic men. The numbers are coming in still a little early, but I think he did better with black men than was expected in the past. What do you think pushed that, especially with the Hispanic voters going for Donald Trump as much as they did? Because that made a big difference.
I think that a lot of it was he was able to sell a lot of Hispanic voters that immigration was a threat to them, that some of the people coming across the border was a threat to them. I think that we've got to be honest, among Hispanic men and black men, there's a lot of misogyny. And I think that we've got to deal with the reality that he appealed to this whole false macho thing that some black men and some Latino men went for. I think that we cannot sit around just bedwetting. We've got to deal with the reality, and we've got to deal with the situation as it is in our own communities.
Well, you guys won't be dealing with reality because you're claiming that she lost due to people being misogynistic and sexism, when really she lost because of the fundamentals. It's really that simple. The economy, stupid. Right? Like, with people are stressing over their finances, why would they vote for Kamala Harris? She's part of the current administration. That makes no sense. And she's going out there talking about we need to turn the page. Her whole campaign was a huge contradiction. That is the problem. That's what they need to come to grips with. And the conversation just continues down this road with him. Watch this.
I just say, Rev, really quickly, too. Democrats need to be mature, and they need to be honest. And they need to say, yes, there's misogyny. But it's not just misogyny from white men. Mm-hmm. It's misogyny from Hispanic men.
Right.
It's misogyny from black men, things we've all been talking about, who do not want a woman leading them. Might be race issues with Hispanics. They don't want a black woman as president of the United States. You know, the Democratic Party, I've always found when you're sitting around talking, they love to just sort of balkanize everybody into these separate groups and say, oh, white people don't like women and black people. No, it is time for the Democrats to say, okay, and you and I have talked about this before, a lot of Hispanic voters have problems with black candidates.
Right.
A lot
and
of,
with other Hispanics. You got some that don't like each other. And some of the most misogynist things I've heard going on this Get Out the Vote tour came from black men. I mean, misogynist things. So you're absolutely right. It's not simplistic.
A lot of Hispanic voters have problems with black candidates. I mean, where do they get that from? Maybe the candidate themselves just isn't a good candidate. Could that be possible? Can we make room that maybe Kamala Harris was never a strong candidate to begin with, right? And when you're asking her to win with only 60 or 90 days of a campaign, maybe that's unrealistic, right? So again, we are witnessing the downfall of the corporate media, okay? Because what is the purpose of them if this is how they react to Trump clearly earning this win last night? But again, don't tell them about podcasts or independent creators, because this is how they see us.
And you have to, within that, figure out how to win. And I think there's a lot of very legitimate discussion here about how Democrats lost this.
Yep.
But I just got a text from a member of Congress saying, you know, something else we need to look at is how people are turning to social media, podcasts, and other non-traditional sources for their news, and also news stations that aren't news. And I canvassed in all of the battlegrounds. I was shocked by the amount of misinformation voters were truly repeating back to me. Truly shocked. I do believe this is what caused the collapse of the Democrats nationwide. You cannot win when people believe lies.
But I
think that's fair, too.
Or maybe you cannot win when people know that you are lying. I mean, what? They believe Trump won because of lies. And you know what? Maybe that is true, but it's not lies coming from the people on the right. It's lies coming from people like you. Your guys' lying and manipulation, and clearly this gross incompetence when it comes to the reporting, the bias that just bleeds through with the utmost clarity. I mean, that pretty much turned off a lot of voters. And when Kamala Harris switched up her joy message to Trump is Hitler, that was the nail in the coffin for her. Now, I said on the live stream, if you were with me, I think a very important point. Maybe they just don't know what they're talking about. Maybe when you're struggling this bad and you experience a loss in this way, maybe it's not really your opponent. Maybe it's not really Donald Trump. Maybe it's you. You don't understand something.
Claire McCaskill, your thoughts this morning?
Well, first, I think we have to acknowledge that Donald Trump knows our country better than we do. I think he figured out that anger and, frankly, fear were way more powerful than appealing to people's better angels. That anger and fear were going to work in this election, whether you're afraid of immigrants or afraid of people who are trans. He figured that out. And I think we all thought everyone's better angels would prevail. Turns out the better angels went on vacation when Donald Trump came down the escalator, and they haven't returned. And listen, credit to Susie Wiles and Chris Savita. And I think that is something that will be talked about for a long time. Books will be written about it. His assassination attempt helped. But keep in mind where he made the most ground where he made up the most ground was first with Hispanic voters, knowing how he's talked about Hispanic people in this campaign. Let that sit for a moment. The second one was, in fact, in urban areas. He did much better. That was the second area he did much better. And the last one was with young voters. I think the Democratic Party was so cocksure that young people would reject this guy because they see a different America than he does. Turns out he appealed to their grievance and their anger and their fear just as much as he was appealing to white folks in rural America that aren't college educated.
Now, again, I don't believe the campaign was about anger and fear, although those may have been the emotions that Americans were feeling, of course, but it was more about just common sense. Why would we give a promotion to the incumbent party who's already run this country into the ground? It just does not make sense. It's not a sexist thing. It's not a misogynistic thing. It's not even a Donald Trump thing. It's why would, if we look at history, why would America finally do something it's never done before? America has always rejected the incumbent party when the economy is not doing good. And again, these people will say, no, the economy is doing great. And that's why they lost. Or maybe another reason why they lost is because, and I hate to do this to you, but we got to just do it one more time because their candidate speaks like this.
Should never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States. Never again. Never again. Never again. Should never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States.
Listen, I had to do it, okay? But it's there's a lot of truth there where she's an empty suit. She never really connected with America, who was in pain, the Americans who were angry and who were scared for their financial future, okay? Not their rights being taken away, right? I mean, there was no acknowledgement of that. But for some reason, deranged Reid, okay, is only acknowledging racial reasons on why Kamala Harris lost. Here's her blaming white women.
But in the end, if they didn't make their numbers and essentially exceed the numbers that Joe Biden had in the suburbs, and I think we have to be blunt about why. Black voters came through for Kamala Harris. White women voters did not. That is what it appears happened in that state, is that if you can't flip enough white women, and we've talked about this on this set numerous times, is that you have a state where you've got a 6-week abortion or a 12-week abortion. I think theirs might be 12 weeks.
Yep.
But it's a state where women lost their reproductive rights, where there was a very heavy push to get women to focus on not putting in place, re-electing, putting back into the White House the person who was responsible for taking those rights away and restoring them. But that message obviously was not enough to get enough white women to vote for Vice President Harris, a fellow woman. This will be the second opportunity that white women in this country have to change the way that they interact with the patriarchy. And
all right, so can I just be honest here, guys? Listen, I think her message just shows you that she believes white women are stupid, just like she believes black men are stupid and radical, right? I mean, these people on this news channel, it's going to be so lovely seeing the downfall because they have zero respect for anyone in this country, quite frankly. Unless you believe everything that they believe, they have zero respect for you. And they don't want to understand your plight. They don't really understand why you think the way that you do. And obviously, an intelligent person should want to understand so that they may realize that, hey, maybe this perspective I have about this country is wrong, right? But again, emotional intelligence, right? And clearly, Jonathan, who has a show on Saturday for MSNBC, his intelligence went out the window because here's his response.
I can't help but wonder if the American people have given up on democracy simply because of what he's told us, what he wants to do, simply because of what the Supreme Court decided in terms of immunity. I mean, he has said he wants to go after his political enemies. I am your retribution. So if indeed what Fox is reporting, if that ends up being true and ends up being the case, then this conversation about who we are as a country, I was going to say will pop off in earnest, but I think we will have an answer, especially because I'm looking over your shoulder. Right now, Donald Trump has 51.2% of total votes. 51.2.
All right, number one, it just shows you how reluctant they are to even call the race, because what you're hearing is at that moment, Fox News had already said Trump was elected, and they wanted to hold back with every fiber of their being in saying that, right? So that's how petty they are. Number two, the country has given up on democracy. No, you guys gave up on democracy when you went after Trump. You gave up on democracy when you staged a soft coup on Joe Biden. And then you anointed her as the nominee, knowing there was no contest, no open convention. That 14 million votes didn't matter. It went straight to her. And please don't let me get into the censorship that took place, the mandating of vaccines, my body, my choice. Yeah, there's so much going on in this country where the real threat has been coming from that side. So, of course, we got to make room for Joe Scarborough himself, because we know he's at the top of the list of Trump derangement syndrome. And I guess here's his excuse on why she lost.
This morning, this is about as bleak as any time for Democrats since the so-called 1984 San Francisco Democrats. It's time for the Democrats to take a good, long, hard look at how this happened. And if they just say Trump bad, Democrats virtuous, they're going to keep losing, because this, again, is so widespread. This is not about just Donald Trump. This is about the Democratic Party and being radically disconnected from the rest of the country. Look at the map.
Wow, it sounds like Joe finally said something that was true. They are radically disconnected. We've been screaming this for the past few months. Like every single video I was doing, I kept telling people, and I'm sure you guys would agree with me that, listen, the Democratic Party, they are not the Democratic Party of 10 years ago. They are so far left to the point where their own party members voted for Trump. Okay, so what we're going to do now is pretty much end this video the way that we started, full circle. And I think it's okay to say that the number one reason that Kamala Harris lost, according to MSDNC, is because of what this gentleman said.
Basil, your top takeaways. What message did American voters send?
Well, a good chunk of the American voter wanted to take their country back, and we will soon see what that means. There are levels of sexism and racism that clearly a lot of people in this country are willing to tolerate, which is also something that, we may have woken up in the same country in a sense, but that becomes much more clear this morning. I would also say that there were conversations for over a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks about how black men weren't doing their part. Black people did their part and did everything they needed to do, including the black woman who ran. So this isn't, and going to a point that Mike Memoli had made earlier, this isn't a Democratic problem per se, because it's not a problem that can be solved with a campaign. These are deep-rooted issues in our country that we absolutely need to address.
They don't want to put the fact that she's incompetent, she has a terrible record, she never answered questions, she was unlikable, she's part of the incumbent party who has a disapproval rating of 54%. None of that is more important than the conversation on sexism and racism when you're talking about of the reasons why she lost. That's how disconnected from reality they really are. And we're going to be there every step of the way to show you the meltdown from MSDNC, every step of the way. Now, guys, the bottom line is this. Trump has been elected as the 47th president of the United States. I will be doing a follow-up video explaining to you why that is. This video was dedicated to the meltdown, and there's more meltdown on other outlets. I'm going to be doing videos on that as well. But I do want to say this. In life, the fundamentals will always reign supreme. It doesn't matter if you're playing sports, whether it's your marriage, whether it's your career, whether you're in college, whether you're working on yourself or your mindset. It's the fundamentals that will always get the job done at the end of the day. And the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris, they got away from the fundamentals. And Donald Trump focused on the fundamentals. And those fundamentals were very clear: the economy, immigration, crime and safety, foreign policy. All four of those things really motivated voters in rural areas to overperform their turnout, and it actually caused the urban voters to underperform when it came to Kamala Harris because her message did not include those fundamentals. So that is my opinion. What do you guys think about the meltdown from NSDNC and their excuse that it's because of sexism and racism on why Kamala Harris lost? Did you join me live last night? If you did, give me a shout down below. I want to say thank you for watching it with me last night live. Now, if you're like me and you want to binge watch and go back to the very beginning of this entire developing story about the election, I did a video yesterday morning pretty much saying exactly what was going to happen and how Kamala Harris went silent. Yeah, which was a huge indicator, and how people were showing up voting in numbers they haven't seen in rural counties. If you want to check out that video, you can click on it because it's coming up right now.